Today we're cracking open a kind of time capsule. We're not just looking at the ancient stories from the book of Genesis. Nope. We're going to see them through the eyes of a 1920 study guide, a curriculum that was built to turn these epic tales into direct life lessons.
So just to be clear, this explainer isn't really about the book of Genesis itself, it's about this guide. It's a very specific curriculum with a really clear point of view on how these stories of, flawed heroes and major family drama should be understood.
Right from the get-go, the preface wastes no time laying out its mission. It says flat out that these histories aren't just old records. They are presented as direct moral examples, or end samples, for the modern student to learn from.
So how exactly does the guide do that? Well, we're going to follow its own path. We'll look at its character studies of Jacob and Joseph, see how it weaves their stories into this grand divine plan, and, of course, check out the final lessons it wants students to walk away with.
Okay, let's dive right in with the guide's first major character study, the very complex, pretty cunning, and, let's be honest, deeply flawed figure of Jacob.
The guide doesn't pull any punches. Lesson 2 is literally titled Jacob the Supplanter. It immediately frames him not as some kind of hero, but by his defining sin. It uses the very meaning of his name to set the stage for a story all about moral failure.
And check this out. The guide meticulously breaks down the whole deceptive scheme to steal his brother's blessing. It actually asks students to notice these special precautions Jacob took, which really highlights just how deliberate and, complete the deception was. It's laid out as a clear moral transgression.
And for the guide, there's a direct line here, a cause and effect. Jacob's deception is what directly leads to him fleeing for his life. And the result? A really difficult 20-year exile working for his uncle. It's presented as the direct fallout from his sin.
Now this is where it gets really interesting. This quote shows how the guide interprets Jacob's famous wrestling match. It's not just some physical fight. The lesson notes explain it as his critical turning point, an internal battle where Jacob finally surrenders his own scheming, self-reliant nature to God.
So this really brings it all together, doesn't it? You see the whole arc laid out. His story is one of profound transformation. He starts as the supplanter, a man of deceit. But after that night of struggle, he earns a new name, Israel, which means Prince of God. It signifies a completely new character.
Okay, let's jump to the next generation and how the guide treats Jacob's favorite son, Joseph. He is framed in a completely different light. He's not a sinner who gets transformed, he's a virtuous man who gets tested.
So the guide really sets the scene here, and it is dramatic. It outlines these potent causes of the family conflict, Jacob's blatant favoritism, Joseph's kind of arrogant dreams, and the brothers' just festering envy, which, as you know, eventually boils over into a conspiracy to actually murder him.
The curriculum lays out Joseph's life as this incredible timeline of one trial after another. From being sold into slavery at 17 to being falsely locked up, each stage is portrayed as a test of his character and his faith. And it's a test the guide makes sure to point out that he passes again and again.
And here's the key difference from his father Jacob, right? Jacob relied on his own cunning, but the guide portrays Joseph as this model of purity and humility. This note describes his character as drawing strength not from himself, but from a divine source, even in the absolute darkest of times.
And this is the payoff according to the guide. The crucial point it makes is that Joseph's incredible rise from a prison cell to the palace, becoming the second most powerful man in Egypt, is the direct reward for his unwavering faith and virtuous character through all that immense suffering.
Okay, so now all the pieces start coming together. The guide brings the two storylines of Jacob and Joseph back together. And it's right here that it reveals what it sees as the ultimate purpose behind decades of deception, betrayal, and all this family turmoil.
The guide really builds the suspense here. Imagine this. Years have passed. A massive famine grips the land. Joseph's brothers are desperate. They travel to Egypt for food. And the guide just drops this dramatic question on you, leading to a fateful reunion they absolutely never saw coming. And bam! Talk about irony, right? The lesson really emphasizes this moment. The brothers bow down to this powerful Egyptian governor, and they have no idea they are fulfilling the very dream that sparked their envy and led them to sell him into slavery all those years ago.
And this quote, this is really the heart of the guide's whole interpretation. When Joseph finally reveals who he is, he doesn't talk about revenge. He completely reframes 2 decades of his own suffering as part of a larger divine plan to save his family and preserve life.
And what's the result of this grand plan? Well, it all comes down to this number, 70.
That's the total number of Jacob's family members who get to migrate to Egypt, saved from the famine, and reunited under the protection of the very son they once left for dead.
So, what are we supposed to take away from all this? What are the guide's final lessons? Well, it concludes by really solidifying the morals it wants students to pull from this epic, multi-generational family saga.
So in his final moments, Jacob actually lays out the future for his sons with these prophecies. The guide uses this to explain the future character of Israel's 12 tribes, linking Judah to royalty, Joseph to prosperity, and Benjamin to fierceness. It's basically turning family history into national destiny.
So, you see, in the end, this was never just a history lesson. This curriculum used this family's sprawling story of sin, struggle, betrayal, and redemption as a literal roadmap for its readers' own moral and spiritual lives.
And if there was any doubt about the guide's mission, it closes with this. It uses this biblical verse as its own mission statement, asserting that these ancient events are recorded specifically for our admonition, as examples and warnings for us today.
This 1920s guide is a really fascinating window into how one generation turned history into a moral compass. And it kind of leaves us with a big question, doesn't it? When we look back at all the stories of the past, how do we choose the narratives that are meant to guide us?